Brilliant. Is everybody here, Janie, with it? Was there anyone else we were waiting for? Do you mind? No, you're muted.
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right, great. And just Joss, do you need to, I know Rich needed to kind of be gone by 11. Do you have that same constraint, or are you more flexible time-wise?
Yeah, I might need to run away at 11 or about by 11:15 if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, great. So we'll start just by introducing ourselves. I'm going to invite each person in turn, and then those who haven't been in the group before, just invite you to sort of say a bit more about why you're here and what projects you're involved with that connect with this group. So so I'll start with you, Fran.
Hi. So yeah, I've met quite a few of you before now. So I am with Sheffield, the Sheffield's Food Partnership, and my interest in mapping is trying to actually work out what areas of Sheffield might be appropriate for growing food. Funnily enough, we've been somewhat let down by the City Council because they haven't really been keeping track of their assets. So I think it's work that we're possibly going to need to do if we're going to move this situation forward. Shall I pass on? Simon.
Hello, greetings from Travel Lodge in Leeds. Not where I normally live, I'm not Alan Partridge. So my name's Simon Ruston, I'm a chartered town planner. My interest is in how can local plans and planning policy more broadly respond to the challenges that we face with the climate crisis, etc., through identifying land for food growing or forestry, and having proactive policies which facilitate people doing such things. And I have been involved in kind of taking cases on behalf of smallholders and small foresters for best part of a decade. But now I'm more interested in how to broadly tackle these issues, but kind of from a more strategic point of view, by actually changing the policy itself, rather than kind of trying to weave what we do into a policy, make the policy more facilitative. There we go, that's good for a Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I'll pass to you, Colin.
Oh, I'm already not muted. Hi, yes, yeah, so I'm Colin Massey. I'm the just recently been given myself a title of Technical Director of Digital Commons, which is a new cooperative formed by Solidarity Economy Association and Shared Assets to pool our mapping technologies together to serve some common good land use and the cooperative and solidarity economy. And we have now so two mapping solutions. One is used for mapping kind of places, entities like cooperatives and solidarity economy initiatives. And the other one is more for land use, which is the LandExplorer platform, which Joolz is going to demonstrate today. But yeah, so yeah, that's a good introduction for me. Jeremy.
Morning. Hi, some of you I've met before, some not. Hello, welcome. I'm just sitting in to listen. Maddie and I work together on this project, and this part of it really has been coordinated and instigated, or catalyzed with Janie and others by Maddie. So I'm just listening in. I just wanted to say one thing. Despite lack of resources and the fact that we both work part-time, we're just sort of really delighted with the way UAC is sort of bringing people together and seeming to facilitate stuff out of thin air. And just as an example of that, we got an unsolicited email from somebody in Peterborough saying, can I join the Policy Influencers Network group? And I think that's the first unsolicited invitation, request we've had. And so it's just really interesting, really positive stuff. So I'll pass on to Anne-Marie.
who will unmute and start video. There we go. Hi, thanks, Jeremy. My name's Anne-Marie Pope, clearly it's there on the screen. I'm from Social Farms and Gardens, which is a UK-wide organisation working across the nations. I work for the Wales team. I'm currently maternity cover on our Resilient Green Spaces project, which is primarily where we're concerned with mapping, looking at mapping social farms and gardens historic pinpoint data, turning that to poly data. We're talking to Colm and digital columns. Also interested in what the invisible spaces that leaves with our mapping of Wales across the different strands of the Resilient Green Spaces, which covers allotments, orchards, food hubs, access to farms and land for new entrants and communities, and also skills, so building sustainable skills for new entrants and future farmers, and how at the end of this project, how the mapping and the results of the project can be taken forward to Welsh Government. Thanks. Shall I nominate Signe? I listened before. I hope that was right.
Yes, that was right. So I'm Signe. I am with Arab alongside Stephanie. I have a background in spatial analysis and urban analytics, and I recently joined the project with Arab and Incredible Edible, their FoodWorks empowerment project, and hopefully quite interested in the mapping element and the spatial element side of the project. So joining in, listening in to this call to hopefully learn something interesting. I'll nominate Janie.
Thanks, Signe. So I am part of the Incredible Edible movement nationally and recently in Lambeth, which is where I've been working on the mapping project with Steph and Signe with Arab. And Maddie and I realised that all this mapping is going on, and that's really how this has all evolved, is trying to share ideas and see how we can collaborate better. So we'll come back to that later, this, you know, how this can be moved forward. But essentially, I see myself alongside Maddie as enabling these conversations and hopefully seeing that we can speed up the process of the mapping of land for food growing. That is my real purpose behind this. Elizabeth, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth Westaway. I am here for sort of under two hats, or a couple of hats. Co-founder and director of Growing Real Food for Nutrition, which is about trying to transform food systems so that they look through a health and nutrition lens. And also I'm part of an initiative trying to get Swansea to become a sustainable food place. So we're actually having these conversations of, well, where is the land in Swansea, you know, city and council, and, you know, who's got the data, or how can we start mapping it? So when I heard about this group, I was thinking, yeah, this is spot on for where we are with that initiative. So thank you. Joss.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good morning, everyone. I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting too many of you just yet. So I'm Joss. I'm from Good People. So we're a social enterprise and a tech for good organization. And our work basically focuses on building better and enabling community networks, purpose-driven community networks, and communities of practice around social challenges and climate challenges. And that's how we met Janie through our work with Incredible Edible in Lambeth. So yeah, lovely to be here with you all. I will pass on to Joolz.
Hello everyone, I'm Joolz, formerly of Shared Assets, hence the fact I'm doing the demo of a minimum viable product for LandExplorer today, but now currently managing director of iFarm, which is a community of practitioners based in Norfolk. We're a community benefit society ostensibly set up to combat social isolation and loneliness. And we set up pre-pandemic, but that's only exacerbated our separation. And we do that through agricultural, horticultural, business, scientific and cultural activities. So it's a lovely broad catch-all umbrella. And I'll go into some detail, I should imagine, while I present LandExplorer and look at, we're a community of practitioners, and the presentation of LandExplorer as a tool for mapping is from a user's perspective. So I'll probably go into a bit more detail about iFarm then. Who hasn't been yet? Mark?
I haven't. Good morning, everyone. And firstly, apologies for being completely blanked out. We've got 4 people in the house, all hitting our Wi-Fi network, working from home and so forth. And it's really poor, particularly upload. So hence me being a bit parsimonious with bandwidth. So apologies for that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a data scientist and a researcher at the University of Bristol's Quantitative Spatial Science Group, where I'm looking at mapping and modelling the food economy at the city region level. In earlier meetings of this group, I presented with Rachel Marshall from the University of Lancaster, who extends her apologies for not being able to attend today, looking at defining locations within the district of Lancaster to identify food growing locations in urban and peri-urban locations. So it's a matter of bringing lots of different data sets together. That project's still ongoing, and we're hoping to publish that early in the new year and also make some resources available. So I'm really interested to hear how other projects have progressed and to learn more about people who are joining us for the first time today. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. And Stephanie.
Hi, yeah, lovely to be here, and really nice to hear everyone's kind of different activities going on. Great group of things going on. I'm Stephanie Robson, so I'm a senior consultant at Arup alongside Singna. We're in the integrated city planning team, but we're part of kind of cities and climate change. And we've been working with Janie and Incredible Edible Lambeth over the past year or so, I guess. Doing kind of a piece of work mapping, you might be already aware of this, but kind of mapping potential food growing places in Lambeth using a combination of kind of existing GIS data, but also getting the community involved in terms of citizen mapping as well, which for me was a really interesting part of it. And I think bringing those two things together is super important, and kind of how you kind of empower people and get people involved in this conversation themselves. So yeah, so I think Joanna Ferro probably has joined one of these meetings before. She's now on maternity leave, so I'm kind of picking up in her stead. But yeah, it's great to be here. And I'm a kind of general interest in mapping and food growing, not a kind of GIS mapper, but yeah, wanting to kind of keep involved as much as possible.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's everyone. So we kind of heard over the last two sessions that we've come together, we've sort of, there's people who are doing mapping and kind of almost like offering mapping, and those who are needing mapping, and so there's this some sort of exchange going on of knowledge between mappers, but also from those who are offering to those for instance, Sheffield or in Wales, who are kind of looking for mapping tools that they can use. And we've heard from Lancaster and from Lambeth and from Newcastle and others. And we are going to hear this morning from Joolz Thompson or Joolz about the LandExplorer tool. Over to you, Joolz.
Cool. So yes, I'm formerly of Shared Assets and work closely with Kate and Colm at Digital Commons. And I helped build a minimum viable product called LandExplorer to help community-led development organizations find, access and manage land. And hopefully I'm going to be able to share my screen. So let's just see if we can do that. Okay, it should be, there we go. So I'm hoping you can see that okay. Cool. So that's the homepage for LandExplorer, which is landexplorer.cc is the domain name, CC for Creative Commons. And we've developed a mapping tool that helps your community live, work, play, generate, and grow. Those are the sort of themes that that we need space for. And what I'm going to demo today is just some of the features, and I'm probably going to ping across to a beta version because it's got a few more features in. And I'll sort of just start by running through some of the tools and where the data comes from. So it's based on Ordnance Survey data, topography layer, and that's served via an API direct from Ordnance Survey, so completely up to date and the most detailed and up-to-date mapping you can get. It has two different layers. So it has an aerial layer, which is probably quite old. So I think the Ordnance Survey actually use a plane and fly and take pictures rather than a satellite. And they sort of constantly cycle around and do the country, but they update that every 5 to 10 years or so. So maybe a little out of date, but the topography layer is fantastic. And the kind of tools that we've built include drawing tools. So you can drop a marker. So you can drop a marker and you can rename it. And then you can find some information about that marker and it'll give you the long and lat, which is quite handy for a variety of things. You can then draw a polygon, which is also really helpful if you want to draw around a particular area, mark something. So if you draw a polygon, you can click on the polygon. You can also rename the polygon. And if you click on information, it will give you the perimeter, the area, the hectares and the acres. So also handy when you're trying to map out quite how big something is. You can draw a line, and that's really helpful if you're going to put in a ditch or you're going to put in some pipe and what have you, because it will tell you really to millimeters how long the line is. And then you can edit the polygons. We've got some layers on there. So if I just zoom in a bit, so this particular plot, this is iFarm right here. And so we've got just over 10 acres, about 10.5 acres. The wooded section here is fen. So we've got 4 acres of swamp. It's positively Jurassic. And then we've got about 6 acres of kind of productive land. And we've got some layers that we've built on there from open government data. So we can, first of all, we can have a look at the agricultural land classification. And what we've got here is grade 4, which is, there is a key on the info, but I don't think it's working on the beta version, but it is working on the actual version. But the yellow is actually grade 4 agricultural, which is pretty sandy soil. And what we've got actually on iFarm, we've got about a foot of peat, and then we've just got sand. And we're actually getting a geologist to look at the different types of sand for us. He happened to be walking by while we're digging a hole, and he said he'd spent his life looking in holes. So he's offered to do some analysis of our sand. At the top of the site, we've got very yellow sand. And at the bottom, we've got very, very grey sand. So he's going to let us know whether or not it's glacial or river or similar. But it's handy to know the agricultural land classification. What we've also got is some historic flood map data. So I can ping it on and you can see there that actually a large proportion of our site floods. And that's not surprising because the Little Ouse, which is the river that we border, is prone to flooding and it is a fen. So on the south side, we actually border the Little Ouse Headwaters Project, who look after Thelneatham Fen. And on our eastern border, we've got Betty's Fen. And as I say, we've got about 4 acres of fen. So not surprising it floods. And last year we had the worst flooding in a generation. So part of what we're doing and part of what we're using LandExplorer for is actually mapping out flood mitigation. So the topography of the land is really important to us to understand where we can put the ditches, berms and drainage. We also have sites of special scientific interest, which is really handy to know if you're ever going to apply for planning. Special protection areas and areas of conservation. We also show green belt and brownfield. So what I'm probably going to do is just zoom to see if I can go to Newcastle. Might take a moment to load. One of the reasons I'm looking at Newcastle, I've been up in Newcastle for about the last 5 years. So if we ping on Greenbelt, you can actually see the areas of Greenbelt in and around Newcastle. Particularly interesting when you look at London's Greenbelt, and the Greenbelt, as most people here probably know, isn't used for the purpose for which it was designed by Ebenezer Howard when he did Garden Cities, which is supposed to be for allotments, peri-urban agriculture supplying the food for the cities. It's generally a place for rich people to keep their horses, a landscape of industrial farming and golf courses. So around London, for instance, there's about 500,000 hectares of greenbelt, I think 27,000 hectares of which are golf courses. Starts to become interesting when you look at the local authorities that might have greenbelt. So Redbridge is one that we're in having some discussions with, and they've got about 2,000 acres of greenbelt within the M25. You know, so when you start to look at planning and what you can actually do with that kind of space, it's really interesting to start to have those conversations, because it's not necessarily the green and pleasant land that many people want to see protected, and you know how we utilize that kind of space with multiple benefits for growing and what have you. It's really handy to know where the greenbelt actually is. And one of the reasons I looked at Newcastle is just to show the brownfield sites that are available. So if we click on brownfield, again, it pings up. You might not be able to see it on the screen. I don't know, show of hands if you can actually see where the patches are coming on for the brownfield. So, you know, we can zoom in and we can start to see the brownfield sites that are potentially available or scheduled for development. Brownfield sites are published by legislation. I think they have to be published annually by all councils now. Councils also keep a register of contaminated brownfield sites, but they don't generally publish that data. So again, when we're looking at sort of urban or peri-urban spaces, really helpful to understand, you know, what land might be available, what might be owned by councils or similar. But the brownfield data is published annually, and it's published in a variety of different formats. So there's very little consistency between that data, and I know that's something that Colm is very interested in looking at in terms of providing, you know, standardized field layouts for the kind of data that's published by government, in particular local government. And of course, if it's published annually, it's about as good as a picture of a traffic light. You know, you don't know if it's still green, because things change over time, and many of those brownfield sites would have been acquired or developed. So it's really interesting when we talk to local authorities to start to try and put on pressure in terms of sort of policy development, that actually that data should be live and published via an API, so we can actually know where it is. So that's some of the drawing tools, some of the layers that we've got on here, and you know, Digital Commons are very interested in what kind of data might be available, what kind of data might be needed from practitioners and users, and actually how we get that into a standardized format to be able to access it. Really excited to hear, I think it was Stephanie, talk about citizen data and crowdsourcing stuff. That's super important and interesting as well. The next tab is information, and I've just sort of zoomed out from a map, and these bits of information provide details on the polygons that were drawn on that particular map. So like I say, it will show the area, the hectares, perimeter, etc. The next thing on here, I'm just going to zoom back to iFarm. So the next thing on here, as I say, is information, and there's quite a lot of bits on here, but one of the things we've been looking at is, well, you know, who owns the land around us? And in particular for a project in conjunction with the parish council, that's relevant for us because we're looking at planting about 1,000 trees for Norfolk's Million Trees campaign. There's in 2022, there's the Queen's Canopy as well, where loads of people are planting trees to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee. And so what we're really interested in is who owns farmland around us. So this is a rough polygon that I drew really just from sort of some local knowledge, and this is owned by a farmer called Jim Flatman, so I can start to have a look at the information for Flatman. And that particular field, about 94 hectares, 230 odd acres, so it's quite substantive. And what we're doing in conjunction with the parish council then is actually to apply for the trees from the Wildlife Trust and from various NGOs. You have to supply details of specifically where it's going to be planted. We also need that for our volunteer teams to understand really where we're going to go. So we can drop a pin and we can get the latitude and longitude or draw a line and similar. We're also interested in potential housing developments. We've looked at a couple of strips as well that might qualify for planning on that particular land. And moving further down on the tools that we've got, this is a beta version, but this one is actually land registry data. And it's a work in progress, so forgive me if it doesn't work perfectly. We're actually using National Polygon Service polygons, and again, an API connection with the land registry to understand who actually owns properties and land around us. So let me just zoom in a moment, and it will load in a minute. It's a bit slow to load because it's a beta survey, beta version. So these green polygons, if I was to click on them, it will show that that's a private. It gives you the reference number and what have you. This is currently non-functional, but when it is functional, you'll be able to actually buy the title and plan, and that's a statutory fee from the land registry. It'll cost you the same if you go to land registry. There is a VAT application implication if you're buying it through land registry. But what is interesting is the access to commercial and corporate data set, which is free. So as well as the land, iFarm are actually also looking at buying the local pub via an asset of community value nomination. So if I just zoom into the pub, and we can have a look at this one here, and that actually shows who it is owned by. So this is owned by Siemens Commercials Limited, which enables us to actually open a dialogue with that company and start to talk about the prospective purchase. This field opposite is really interesting because it's absolutely massive, and it is, let me have a look, that's trustees of JRE and MGW Lawton's Trust. So again, we start to understand which companies are owning land surrounding us and the village. And this particular field, I think it's a couple of 100 acres or 176 acres, so one massive field. So iFarm are funded by Power to Change, Bright Ideas Fund. We're funded by Breckland District Council for water management from their Greening Communities Fund. We're also funded by Norfolk Community Foundation now for volunteer days. And so what's really important for us to understand in our journey in searching for land, we've had a couple of iterations of iFarm, and we've looked at different sites. And so these grant applications for actually planning, understanding the local community, it's really important we understand the land. So I'm just going to load another map. So what you can also do is you can save the map that you've drawn. So it's really important. And then you can actually share the map, so you can actually collaborate with your community group and or share it with the local authority. What you can't currently do is actually collaborate like Google Docs and two people work on the same map at the same time, because that's quite a trick to actually develop those kind of features. And I know it's likely in the roadmap, but can't currently do it. So if I was to have a look at this, so I'll just quickly open this up. So this was a previous site that we'd looked at, and we'd gone into some detail actually working out a site plan. So, sort of where the barn is, there's an old barn, some stables where hard standing for vehicles might go, where the solar power might go, and this kind of thing. So we've gone into some detail there. but unfortunately we were unable to acquire this particular site. There's also another fen there, which is an SSI, but we were unable to acquire that site. So during the process, while we're actually looking at stuff, LandExplorer helped us to slim down some of the requirements and saved an awful lot of site visits and consultancy by actually managing to exclude prospective sites that were perhaps not appropriate. Oops, that's the wrong one. And where we are at the moment so what we're doing is obviously, so this is a line of iFarm, a good proportion of the site to just remain wild. And so we've actually imported a base layer of the Ordnance Survey data into a program called Sketchup, and Sketchup is 3D modeling, which has allowed us to do a much more detailed site plan. So some of the really exciting things here are when we get to using APIs from other tools with open government data and Ordnance Survey mapping through an application like LandExplorer, means that we can actually produce 3D versions of our site plan. And what started as a scribble in a document, what started as a scribble in a notebook has then been transcribed into a much more detailed site plan. And so this is our site plan, and we've got some things, you know, some wallopinis, some sunken greenhouses, really important. They don't, you know, the water, they don't flood, so we've got to build up to go down. And then at the bottom we've got natural reed bed filtration from rainwater capture, which we're going to use for our utilities, so washing up and showering. Then that grey water filtration through a reed bed. We're planting about 1,000 willows to actually suck up some of the water. We've got a silt pond, and then we're putting in a deep pond in conjunction with Norfolk Ponds Project and the Environment Agency. So a well-managed pond will increase plant pollinator, improve or deliver healthy plant pollinator relationships and actually increase biodiversity. So this section at the bottom will actually be managed flooding with a berm, a sluice gate, and a variety of drainage on the site to actually keep the bit that we're on relatively dry. So this is the kind of thing that we need to actually transcribe into the mapping, and that supports our grant-funded applications, also supports our volunteer-led activity. And what's really important here, I wrote a blog piece for Shared Assets when I was with them, you know, about LandExplorer and about how we use neighbourhood development planning to fight climate change. We've also recently applied for some funding to write a community climate action plan. You know, what does that activity look like on a hyperlocal level in the villages that we're in? And that incorporates things like how do we adapt to mitigate flooding? Because flooding has been mentioned many times now in our parish council minutes. It's a real problem. You can't see it, but just at the end of this site plan, there's actually a bridge, and that's normally under 4 foot of water in winter. The road is impassable, and the flooding and the fields to the south are completely covered in water. So, you know, when we start to ask kind of questions about how we approach community climate action, it's non-partisan, it's not political, it's just what do we do about the flooding? It's a completely practical question that everybody understands. And we're starting to have really interesting dialogues with the local authority, the parish, the district, and the county council about how we approach some of these things and how we build resilience in our communities when it comes to housing, energy, agriculture, and transport. So I just mentioned the pub, and the pub's likely to form the cornerstone of a smart energy microgrid for the village. But ultimately, we need to map these things and show where they are, and actually show, you know, sort of which bits of land are where. So I think I might have a few minutes left. Do dive in Janie or Maddie, if I'm going over time, but I think I've got a few minutes left. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about some of the ideas we've had from a user perspective. So we've written a document, happy to share it with everyone about where do we go from here. You know, it's from a product development perspective, we'd normally frame user requests in an agile methodology. I'll just skip to that bit so I can actually read it. If I can just find out, see it. I can't. Here we go. Yeah. So as a persona, I want to so that, and I will know when it was complete when. And this structure is helpful for defining done, and that person can capture their desired value when the story is complete. So as a site manager, I need to know where the ditches go so that I can manage the volunteer activity to deliver our drainage, and I'll know when it's done when I can calculate where the ditches go. That's framing that product development request in an agile statement. And for speed in this document, we've just listed it as wouldn't it be good if. So we've used LandExplorer to search for land, find our sites, map our sites, and do a site plan. We've used it for grant applications, and we've then started using other mashups of applications, including SketchUp. And you know, when we go down that path, it's really exciting. Our architects uses Unreal, which is a games engine for 3D design and Unity, and that they actually build physics into the environment. But that's quite an interesting perspective development where we can actually build the environment and then go in 3D and actually have a look at it. We can map where the water flows are and see where the water goes and what have you. Wouldn't it be good if we could map existing land projects? I think everyone here agrees, and share resources. So who's where? You know, in East Anglia, we're lucky enough to have a thing called Wild East, who have an aspiration of rewilding a 20% of East Anglia, which is 500,000 hectares. And they've got a map of dreams. So everybody pledging their little bits of rewilding. And it'd be great if we could use Ordnance Survey data for that. Wouldn't it be good if we could search for skills and volunteers? And there's an interesting application called Murmurations, which I know Colin is looking at. Wouldn't it be good if we know what land was available through the public sector, from brownfield sites to land for sale, rent or lease, in particular public land, you know, the NHS estate, local authority, utility or church land. Recently, Michael Gove announced 6,000 homes are scheduled for construction on brownfield sites. And they're likely poorly insulated and probably have little space allocated for community supported agriculture. It'd be great for our communities to know where they are, where they're scheduled for. It would be good if we could integrate with other communications tools like Slack or community management tools. And I know we're going to have a presentation about Gather, and you know, we've looked at other applications like Vocalize. Wouldn't it be great if more users could edit and collaborate on the map? And wouldn't it be good if we could actually have drawing tools like trees? We could just drop a tree and then show actually how that tree changes over time with the slider. You know, what does that site look like 60 years on? And we're really interested in measuring stuff. So we want community climate action to actually measure data, you know, air quality, soil quality, water quality. 100% of our rivers fail the chemical test, and about 87% of them fail the ecology test. We want to measure all of that stuff and report it on our site in the local area. We'd love to upload shape files. So we've downloaded on the files, or the area that I showed you from the farmers, we've actually downloaded a bunch of shape files from DEFRA using the Rural Payments Agency gateway, and they've got an API, so we could just import those shape files. And this is some of the examples of shape files we got from the Rural Payments Agency from DEFRA. And then there's some very practical things like, wouldn't it be good if I could calculate the volume of compost I require for a particular area? You know, how much are we going to need to store, you know? And I mentioned SketchUp's API and actual API and OS data for contours in terms of water management. So there are companies like Viridian Logic that have algorithms that show the change in water flow if you actually change the landscape. So we can model that and see if we dig a pond there, how will that affect the water flow and potentially mitigate flooding. And I've mentioned a bit of measurement. on a very large scale. There's some beautiful links in this document showing how mapping pollution in factories in China has actually changed both procurement from American corporations and use, and actually changed policy. We've had conversations with organizations like PowerPaired, who are using or are mapping local authorities' existing stock for putting on solar energy. And then we get some really cool stuff with drones. So we can scan with drones, we can use LiDAR, we can actually map ecology and species with drones using National Geographic Seek app and a high-res camera. We can literally hover over and we can do segments of biodiversity mapping that would normally be done manually and be done over time in about 3 months. We can do that every 48 hours, and we can tell you what plants or species are actually in that square meter, just mapping with a drone. And there's a lovely TED talk on a way to restore Earth's biodiversity and looking at that kind of technology from a drone. So all in all, ultimately, we'd also like to see augmented reality versions where we can import all of this data and then actually put some goggles on and walk around with the local authority or with our community, physically show them stuff and what it might look like in 20 to 30 years. And finally, there's a very lovely board that's an augmented reality board, and it's for playing games. And I'd invite you to have a look at some of the looks. It's for playing games, but wouldn't it be lovely if you can roll out a map and that's your site, and you can actually just move stuff around and show when you're doing community engagement, or if you're talking to the local authority. So there's some of the sort of features that we've had a bit of a dream about with the team, and hoping to work with the team at Digital Commons moving forward to actually deliver. And yeah, I really love everyone in this group to participate in that process and kind of, you know, maybe share some ideas about where we can go with mapping, because it's a driving force behind everything, and it's a journey, and every journey starts with a map. And there we go, that's LandExplorer.
Wow, amazing. God, that's really got everyone's imaginations flowing. I think definitely with the kind of augmented reality stuff, that the way that maps can connect and sort of fire the imagination is actually a really important, yeah, direction. There's a couple of questions in the chat so far. Mark, do you want to ask yours?
Sure, thanks, Maddie, and thanks, Jules. That was really interesting. And I was just really struck when looking at the brownfield data in Newcastle, how useful that would be, particularly for looking at opportunities for agricultural food production in urban areas. But you said that these data come from all the different local authorities, and they're annual, and you know, you suggested that there were issues there in terms of data structures and so forth. So I suppose I've got two questions. One is, within LandExplorer, is that brownfield data comprehensive across the UK? And if it is, or if it isn't, how have you managed to collate all these different data sets from councils into a single layer?
Great question. No, it's just Newcastle, and I did Newcastle because that's where I was living at the time. The data actually came from the Newcastle City Council website, so you can just download the files. They generally come in a spreadsheet, but they're not necessarily in a consistent format between local authorities. So with 300 plus councils, it's obviously a lot of manual work to download it and upload it. And the file formats might not be consistent between the local authorities. So that's why it's, LandExplorer is a grant-funded project to date. It's now been moved into Digital Commons, so it's being further developed. But that's why it's just Newcastle at the moment. And what would be great is if councils provided that data via a live service via API and a standardized format. In terms of citizen collection of data, one of the you know, again, a feature that would be great for LandExplorer to have is the ability for a user to be able to actually just download from the local authority and upload and map fields similar the same way you might in something like MailChimp when you're uploading a you know, marketing database. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great. Thanks very much.
Fran, you had a question as well.
Yes, I'm really, it's great. I'm loving it. I want to get using it immediately. So, but my major interest is how do you export the data to SketchUp?
You don't really. So what we did was we just took a picture of the so it doesn't really have any integration at this stage. So it's literally just a picture of the Ordnance Survey map. Then we put that in SketchUp and sort of drew around that. So we can see the Ordnance Survey map, but it's not really a to and fro in terms of data.
Is it just like a screenshot then, effectively?
Yes.
Just jumping in there, yes. So export options are on the very near horizon for features, so that'll be coming very soon.
Elizabeth was asking as well, how long did it take you to map Newcastle?
Do you mean in terms of the brownfield sites?
No, I was thinking just generally, because you captured a lot of very interesting and relevant data there. So it's just this sort of, well, say if that was going to be done for another city or town, like how long would it take?
Okay, sure. But we can break it down into the data sets. So the actual mapping itself is Ordnance Survey. So that's live mapping data from Ordnance Survey's API. So the map of the UK exists for everywhere. I say the UK, it currently excludes Northern Ireland, I think. And then much of the data we've got, again, there are different government agencies, so it might be England. But for Newcastle, we looked at Greenbelt, and that data set is UK wide. But the brownfield sites are specific for Newcastle. How long does that take? Well, you can, it's at this stage, it's downloading the data, a little bit of development work, or for developers to actually upload the files as opposed to a user. So it requires a feature, but to be built, which I wouldn't imagine is that much work. And that would allow a user to do it. And then you can actually represent brownfield sites probably within within half an hour of a user going on and downloading the data.
Has anyone else got any questions at this stage? Just conscious that you're going to hear from Joss next about Gather, and you've got to leave by 1:15 at the latest. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. But I'll talk very quickly.
All right. So thank you very much, Joolz. We can let that percolate and come back to that as well. But I'll just pass over to Joss to talk about Gather. Obviously, it's, thinking about how we as a community of mappers come together in a more kind of solid way beyond just these gatherings. Over to you.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. And thanks for that presentation, Joolz. Just to say, I don't have any lines as snappy as we're at the start of a journey, and every journey begins with a map. So just lower your expectations quite significantly in terms of the wordsmithing that will be involved in this one. But so thanks for having me, everyone. Some context, as I say, Good People is a social enterprise, and with our platform Gather, we're really focused on better supporting and enabling community networks and communities of practice, both around kind of social and environmental challenges. So on the social side, we focus on place-based employment and skills, connecting people, often disadvantaged people, to opportunity and the support that they need, around health and well-being, but then also on the climate side. And I think that's kind of what's kind of brought us here today and is most relevant for you guys. So I thought maybe what I'd do is I'd go through a demo of a platform that we developed called Moving Beyond, which is a climate network. I'll quickly kind of talk through it. I suppose I'll give a quick idea of how it may be of relevance and of interest to you guys, and then we can go from there. So, can you guys all see my screen?
Yep.
Wonderful. Cool. Okay, so this is the Gather site, and this is one that we've built. This is a demo version of the version that we've built, but this is for something called Moving Beyond. Now, Moving Beyond is a community and an event series bringing together a series of kind of climate leaders from different sectors, both public and private. So it includes corporates from different sectors like BT Openreach, BP, Microsoft from the kind of fundraising realm, Permira from private equity, and Schroders from public equity. We had some policymakers, politicians, including Jane Davidson, who led on the kind of Wealth for Future Generations Act through the Welsh Parliament, if anybody's heard of that, as well as community representatives, XR catalyzers, etc. And the aim of Moving Beyond was effectively to bring together a group of, I suppose, practitioners, innovators, people passionate about climate from different areas and walks of life, and give them the space to work out, I suppose, what the space between them was, share the things that they're working on, their best practice, the things that they're interested in collaborating on, and enabling people to create connections from different industries and different sectors towards getting to net zero as quickly as physically possible. And so that was the aim of Moving Beyond, which, as I say, is a kind of an event series, but that we've also developed a kind of digital platform, digital community to support. So this is the Moving Beyond Gather platform, and I'll just take you through it quickly. First, to go into groups, which is really the heart of what we are looking to do. So effectively, every user on Moving Beyond on this Gather platform can set up or join groups, and groups can be public, i.e. everyone in the community can see them. They can be private, so that everyone can see them, but you need to be invited to join, or they can be secret. So only if you're invited to it does it show up on this page. And the aim really was to enable, say, a series of people from BT Openreach to collaborate on a project or projects that were specific to their organization, but then also give them the opportunity to collaborate in groups with people from other organizations, say around key themes. So it might be energy, it might be food, it might be air quality, so that they both had spaces for their own organization or people within that organization to discuss and collaborate, but then also more public spaces as well. So for instance, these are just a few example groups for this demo version, but to go into one of them, so this is difficult conversations, because one of the themes that emerged was a need for us to be more open about talking about, for instance, the impact of growth or degrowth on big corporates that are kind of founded on and led by the need for continued growth. So that was the reason for this as an ongoing group. But in each of these groups, you would have a quick summary of the conversation. You would have the organizer or the moderator here on the left. And then effectively within each group, you could have discussion boards, so forums. You can submit photos and documents, and these effectively become a place for that community, that group, to come together to discuss things, to ask questions, to share ideas or thoughts, things they need help with, etc. You can also hold Zoom meetings from within these groups with Zoom credentials that are not personal to any one person, so no private information needs to be shared. Those meetings can then also be, so they can be found on here. You can see the details, and it's held within this platform. but you can also access, if a past event has been recorded, you can also access past events on here if you join the group. So for instance, if you guys were coming together as part of this group, that could be a group on this platform, and someone who wasn't able to attend today could find the past meeting, the recording on there. As I say, you can also submit documents, photos from previous discussions. You can see a summary of the members in the group. And by signing up to be a part of it, you can receive the updates. As I say, there may be, for instance, a public group that's available for everyone. So for instance, it might be kind of the people on this call. But say a group of us were working on a specific project somewhere, and we wanted to bring a few people in to collaborate, we could create a private group and bring people in to focus on our specific project. So those are the groups. And obviously this demo version only has 4, but in other versions, you know, we have 10, 20, 30, 40. And those groups can be only set up by admins, but we often find that that you only really begin to realize just how many interesting groups, projects, activities, collaboration opportunities there are when people have the opportunity to share what they're working on. The platform also contains a members directory. And on that, so the platform has kind of messaging, private messaging functionality, although it can be turned off if need be. So you can go onto a profile, you can see someone's details, you can change your own summary, and I can reach out, see the groups this person is involved in, and reach out to them directly. So that's the members directory. In some instances of this this Gather platform, the members could be organizations, but again, we find that people tend to reach out more to individual people. So that's our focus in a lot of these communities. There's other functionality we can build on top as well. So this one has this demo version has an events calendar, so which can be submitted by the community. So for instance, if all of us on this call and lots of other people were finding interesting mapping related or mapping driven events, opportunities for collaboration, etc., those can be submitted to the platform and are available to everyone either in this kind of summary list or a kind of month or day structure. We can also submit, so on other versions of the platform, we have a kind of resources section. So this one's just here for show for now. But effectively the resources section becomes a repository for best practice. So a place for people to share resources, share things that have worked in their area. It might be new platforms to use. It might be a new approach or a letter to a local authority requesting certain information, and that becomes effectively a document sharing or a best practice sharing space. So that's a very quick rundown of Gather as it pertains to a kind of a climate community like this. And the reason I showed this one is because much like you guys, I think Moving Beyond is a collection of people often working on quite different, maybe quite different places or different contexts or different stakeholders, but are often looking to create those connections between those different opportunities, those unlikely collaborations that can create real opportunity. So yeah, that's a quick spin through Gather. I'm sorry I didn't have more time to nip through it, but hopefully that was helpful. And if there are any initial questions, do let me know.
Thanks very much, Joss. I have to admit that it was my suggestion that we brought in Rich and Joss from Gather, and I would really value your thoughts on whether this is something that you are excited about and whether it would work for us as a group of mappers. I can see, initially I saw it as a place for sharing these resources, so we're not kind of replicating all the time. But I also think that one of the things that I wanted to ask everybody here today is, are you, through these sessions, beginning to collaborate with individuals that you're meeting through these sessions? So could Gather be a brilliant way of finding opportunities across the country where you can collaborate, share ideas and best practice. So perhaps you'd like, if anybody has any questions right now for Joss, I'm also conscious that there are other platforms out there which we could, as Joolz has mentioned one, we could potentially look at that. Is there value in this, or are we barking up the wrong tree? It's kind of, you know, speed is of the essence here. We don't want to mess about. We want, we're all, I think everyone in the room is very keen on digital commons, on the open, what do you call the expression, please? Data. So any thoughts here would be very valued. Silence. Joolz.
I think it looks really cool, and I'd be really excited to have a look at it and get under the hood. I was just typing some stuff in the chat, but I might as well just say I'd be really interested to understand what the legal form is for digital commons, for instance, as a platform co-op, and certainly very excited in terms of multi-stakeholder co-ops where actually users and technology providers and practitioners are all actually part of the legal form. I'm curious if the code is open source and what the tech stack is as well, but that's probably not for this meeting. I don't want to bore the pants off everyone, but maybe you and I can catch up about that, Joss. And would love to get a demo login to have a little play, and perhaps even see what cool stuff we might be able to do together. But I think it looks really exciting. Yeah, and there are various flavors out there, but speed is of the essence. This looks pretty cool. Joss is here, so I'd be quite excited to start having a play and see what we could do with it.
Okay, so could we have a show of hands of people who think this is something that we should explore further? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. So I'd be interested, Simon, to have your view on it.
I feel like I'm slightly too new to have an opinion quite yet.
Okay, that's fine, but you're not negative about it right now.
I'm kind of sitting on the margins of neutrality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go. I'm conscious that Joss has to leave, but let's take this outside of this room and think about where we go next with it. Because I'm conscious this is our third meeting. We need to really be considering why we're meeting, what are the next moves, in a sense, of this group, because everybody's doing incredible work all over the country. And one of the things that Maddie and I were talking about before this meeting is it'd be very good to know how many of you have had discussions. I mean, not everybody's here today, but how many of you have had discussions outside of these meetings with people you've met here on this? This is the third meeting, and I'm conscious, Simon, you're new. But has it really helped you with the next, with sharing ideas between your, I'm seeing what Mark is saying. Anybody have any comments?
Fran has got her hand up.
Oh, Fran, go for it, yes.
So perhaps the other way around, I've been able to sort of contribute to Rachel's research, just using some of the, the practical considerations as to what might actually go into what layers the mapping needs. And in particular, I was thinking, because this is something Joolz picked up on, local knowledge There's nothing like it. So yeah, that was something I was keen to get transferred across to her research. I think the problem from our perspective is I'd love to be getting on with this. I'd love to do the council's job for them for, you know, having not kept track of their data, but I have an extremely limited capacity at the moment. So that's why I haven't been able to move forward with this as much as I'd like. When the time presents itself, I'm going to get mapping furiously because there's so much to be done. But yeah, it will come down to me probably.
Okay, so usual problem of capacity for all of us, I'm sure. Joss.
I was just going to say, yeah, sorry, I have to run away now, but just wanted to pop in and say, yeah, goodbye. Thanks very much, Jules. Yeah, it'd be great to chat about integrating what you're doing. And the other thing to say is, you know, we're if this is a marathon, we are probably 50 yards in, still tying our shoelaces. So lots to learn. But if there is an opportunity for us to help in whatever way, then we'd love to be a part of it, because you guys are doing some super interesting work. So yeah, thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thanks, Joss. Thanks for coming. So,
Colin, his hand up.
Sorry, who did? Con? Yeah, go for it.
What was I going to say? Yeah, so to answer your question about have we made connections with people who we haven't met before through this, I would say not quite yet, but kind of I think it's kind of imminent. Kind of the Digital Commons will be going through a phase of work kind of early next year, which will involve kind of a lot of outreach. And I think I would definitely wanting to talk to you, or from my new colleagues, we want to talk to you about things. So I think that it will come into its own for us in the new year.
And how do you see it coming into its own in terms of how would you like to share those conversations best? Would that be one-to-one with you?
I can imagine us hosting workshops,
yeah,
for members to kind of the job that Joolz did with his team at iFarm, and where they're like, you know, they're brainstorming about what would be useful for them on the back of what technology that was already available for them. They're imagining what the next features, from short ones to big visionary ones. So I can see doing something similar with this group. We would love to, and that then led to more detailed conversations with individual organizations. Then that could happen too, but probably starting with some sort of workshop.
Yeah.
And we will be hopefully inviting people to join our co-op also in probably before halfway through the year, if anyone wanted to join us and part of the cooperative. That was the way.
The shared knowledge here, like Maddie and Jeremy have been doing this in other situations, but the shared information and the knowledge here is, you know, combined, I should say, not shared, combined knowledge is really phenomenal. And even just mapping who we are today and what we're all doing, so that we can all see that, I just think that would be pretty good way of starting. And I could see that could be a very simple gather type platform almost immediately, just having all of us there and saying what we're doing, and having that as a resource for people who are not yet on this journey to access best practice information, really, of maybe providing, you know, what's the USP, what's the thing that you're doing that other people are not doing, that might be of value. So I guess it's like a sort of smorgasbord of all these different methods, I guess, different methodologies. Maddie.
Excuse me. Yeah, I just wanted to, thinking about the Gather platform or equivalent, I suppose that would be really useful in terms of expediting all of these connections, organizing workshops and sort of having that, starting to weave those conversations and projects together. And I was wondering about Colm, you said before about how you're doing like project mapping, or like mapping of organizations as well as mapping of land. I wondered, and also thinking about the kind of open data or not nature of Gather. He didn't sort of answer those questions, but I wonder if it's not done in that kind of commoning way. Are there other platforms that you know are, and does that mean that Gather would be like off the table as the thing that we would use? Because obviously, to my mind, we kind of want to use the thing that is most in the spirit of a kind of regenerative community. And yeah, so just wanted to ask you a bit more, Colm, about what you feel is the best platform for us to use as a group to share our knowledge and
kind of
reach out to each other.
I don't think I have I couldn't off the top of my head think of the best answer, and we need to maybe just think a little bit more about what the needs and aspirations are for the group, and then choose something that sort of fits that. I think as far that there are many very good platform applications that are kind of they themselves are kind of corporate and proprietary, but they don't necessarily own your data, and then you can get your data back out again afterwards. So they don't necessarily have they don't abuse your data. So I think kind of the questions Joolz was going to ask, I think if we got the answers to those, but also how can we get the data back out again? What was very frustrating is you invest time in learning a new platform, and people, you got to bring people on board, and then it doesn't quite work out. You can't move your data elsewhere without a lot of pain. So I think that's probably the most important thing when investing in a new platform, is that you are able to get your information out and it's still yours, and then you can move it somewhere else. So I think Joolz could probably find that out for us in this conversation.
So
yeah, would you be happy, Joolz, to be our kind of researcher around that and feed back to everybody your findings?
Yes, absolutely. I think we need to separate the platform and the data in terms of they're slightly different things. Data portability is really important. So, who owns the data? Can it be taken out, as Colm says? And yes, Maddie, the key thing for me is we've got to do what it says on the tin and be a digital part of the digital commons. Be a cooperative, because who owns our digital real estate and digital space is as important as who owns the land, in terms of tools and software and what have you. So if we can be the change we want to see in the world, so much the better, and support initiatives like LandExplorer and hopefully Gather, if they're heading, sounds like they're heading in the same direction, or might be open to those kind of conversations, being tech for good. So yeah. And in answer to Janie's question, yeah, I've had some really fruitful conversations with other people in this network, not least Mary from Friends of the Earth, Maddie and Janie as well. And pleased to see Simon here before I've met you. I don't know if you remember, Simon, we met a couple of things, maybe Control Shift or something, I don't know, or RFC, something like that, but we've met before. So keeping in touch with everyone here is one of the most powerful things in our network. So I think it's really important. But yeah, I'm happy to take that on, do a bit of an assessment. Quite excited about it, actually.
So good, Joolz, thank you. Elizabeth's asking a question, okay, how would I map Swansea, which is essentially what I imagine people will be coming to something like Gather and, I want to map Swansea, how do I do it? And I think the learning from Arup would be very useful. So perhaps that could be a conversation you could continue, Steph, with Elizabeth.
Yeah, very happy to.
I did think that mixture of all of the readily accessible data that Joolz has mentioned, layered, plus the citizen participation, that made it a very exciting project. And I loved seeing the LandExplorer tool again, Joolz, although you've shown it a little, but to me, to see that you can just go and make a polygon around a piece of land and you know exactly how much is there. And then you can access that information about brownfield, greenbelt, all of this stuff is just, it's absolutely invaluable for potential food growing. So yes, I hope that's helpful, Elizabeth.
Yep, that sounds good. So I've put my email in the chat there. So Stephanie, that'd be great if we can arrange to chat.
That's fine. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good.
And Mark has got his hand up.
Thanks, Maddie. So I thought the Gather system really interesting, and I think it would be useful or something like this because it would facilitate kind of offline communication, or not offline communication, but you know, communication outside of the meeting. I notice on there they've got things like discussion boards, the option to drop documents in and so forth. Also being able to host Zoom meetings on this would be great. Don't know if they've got a doodle pad. Sorry, not what's it called? What's the one we use to coordinate all the dates, because that's kind of quite important. I'm not sure if that's kind of date coordination is within that. The questions I've got, one is to kind of reiterate what Colm and Joolz said, is we've got to be able to get our data out of it. You've always, whenever you kind of subscribe to a service, you've got to almost prepare for the day you leave that service and be quite clear about how you can get, how easy it is to get stuff out. And frankly, if it's not easy to get out, you shouldn't get involved with it, full stop. I don't know if there's a cost involved in this. Is this from us as a group or as individuals? I think that would be useful to know. And also, are there other similar services out there that we could do a comparison? Because this looks great, but it's quite new. And so one of the questions is, will it have longevity? And again, going back to what Colm said, you invest a lot of time and effort, not only learning a system, but kind of getting everyone used to it and working with it, and then suddenly you've got to drop it. That'd be very, very frustrating. So that's just my tuppeny worth there.
That's brilliant, Mark. So really good questions, which perhaps is there a way we could share a Google document to put these questions into them? And if Joolz, if you have any information that you want to put in there, and we can pose these questions together. I did talk to Rich Tyree, who wasn't there. I did say to him, okay, what are the cost implications here? How quickly can this happen? Because we don't want this taking months to create. And he had some ideas about where we could source funding from. So that would be good. We absolutely have to know that we can get the data out. We absolutely have to know that this has legs and will last. So really great questions, Mark. And what other facilities we want on there for us to meet and share, and for other people to access that information. So there's a lot of work to do, obviously, but let's start a document and get some questions onto it, which Joss can start to respond to. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'm happy to start that document. And if Mark, if you wanted to put those questions in the chat, then I can, while they're fresh in your mind, or anyone else for that matter, I can just then take stuff from the chat and put it in the doc.
Okay.
Yeah. Anne-Marie, you mentioned in the chat in Wales, there's the data map Wales, which is a bit of a behemoth. Do you want to say a bit more about
Yeah, I'm kind of, again, it's capacity, isn't it? But every time I go and try to use the data map, I just get lost. The bit that I'm actually looking for crashes. And it's just, it looks amazing, the amount of maps that are available on it. But it's there needs to be some kind of training session from Welsh Government on it, I think. Is anybody aware of it? Has anybody used it?
We might
have oh, go on.
So, yeah, I've used it a little bit in some energy projects I've been working on in Wales. It's very useful, but it does take a while to quite kind of work your way around it and familiarize yourselves. It took me a while just to find the data that I needed. But once you find the data you need, it's quite easy to download it and use it in your own projects.
Great. I might, Signe, could you send me your email if I send you an email as well? Then we'll all, there we go, all the connections are happening.
Can you ask, is there somebody within government that you can, in the GIS bit or whatever, that you can ask for training, Anne-Marie?
Yeah, we had a meeting with someone last week, in fact, in the land assets who was mentioning training. So I'm currently trying to get a hold of the chap in geography, I believe, that I need to speak to. But apparently his own colleagues find him really difficult to get hold of. But I shall persevere, because I'm nothing if not tenacious. I will carry on.
And so is that a good data set? You said it was amazing. Are there sort of gaps or any kind of hurdles to using it for what you need?
I think one of the main things is that there seems to be so much information on there. It's difficult to see what's on there. There's something like 183 different data layers that you can access. So even seeing what those are to start with in any kind of usable, understandable way is quite difficult. I'm pretty sure there are gaps, yes, particularly around the community groups. Yeah, so there definitely will be. Yeah, it's just really difficult to get a sense of what's there with that, because I'm no mapping expert by any stretch. It's part of the projects I'm working on. I've now gathered a really big interest in it. So yeah, it's going to be useful to maybe get some quick entries from Signe.
Yeah, I think Stephanie might have some, because Signe came to the project a bit later, but Stephanie might have some initial ideas on best data sets to use, because that actually took some time to decipher within the Lambeth Authority which were the best data sets to pull out. I mean, obviously it depends what you're trying to do, but I think most of us are trying to access land for communities who are struggling to access land. And those communities are often the more deprived communities. So it's working out where the areas of deprivation was a really big one for us. And if you're in a city situation, main roads, away from main roads, there were a whole load of data sets that Steph, maybe you want to comment on that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the way that we looked at it when we were doing the Lambeth work is we looked at kind of the need and the feasibility, and that's where we kind of focused to where we got kind of existing data sets from. So need being, as Janie says, kind of socioeconomic indicators, or multiple indexes of multiple deprivation and that kind of thing. And also, I think we used some kind of ecological data sets around kind of need for increased green space, biodiversity, and that kind of thing. And then in terms of feasibility, this is stretching my mind a little bit back, but we looked at kind of air pollution issues around, so not using land directly around major roads, land contamination and sites to be aware of, things like that. Obviously kind of like developed areas, and land ownership as well came into that. So I think kind of trying to go through the logic of what it is that you're trying to achieve, and from there kind of thinking about what are the useful data sets that you would want to include, and are they available? In a lot of cases there was probably data that we would have liked to have but we didn't. So yeah, I think, but that kind of logical methodology of what it is that you're trying to achieve, and therefore what it is that you need to know on the data side, and then of course getting the citizens involved and the local knowledge, and getting people out and about and saying, well, look, there's a space here that could be used, and there's a space there that could be used, and then bringing those things together is basically what we did, was bring all of that together and say, well, look, if you kind of filter on the the highest kind of indicators for need and the most feasible areas. These are the areas of priority, and look, this is what the citizens have said they know about in terms of opportunities. And that's kind of where that project got to identify these areas, kind of prioritized areas for potential food growing, I guess, is how we ended it. I don't know if that's kind of helpful. And Janie, if you had any other thoughts.
I'm really interested in the citizen mapping. That sounds amazing. And yeah, because we've got 6 different work strands that we're working across, we've got some existing data, and there's different priorities within each of the different work streams. So yeah, I look forward to talking to you outside of this. But of course, the one data set that I want to use isn't available on that system. So yeah.
So I had one thing that I'd just like to plug here, which some of you know about, is Incredible Edible nationally are working on a right to grow bill. And I think a lot of what Joolz was talking about with his wouldn't it be good if, don't go away, Joolz, wouldn't it be good if, like so many of those wouldn't it be goods, I think, relate to right to grow. And obviously the mapping bit is so essential for us to highlight these issues with the local authorities not providing accessible information on land that may be available. So there's a lot of pressure that we need, and this is a right to grow food on land in the public realm. That is what the bill is being framed as, and we're working on it now. We're having a big meeting in April in Parliament to kind of schmooze all the right bods. If you know people who should be at that meeting, please let me know, because we're trying to get a collection of influential people in the room to support this notion, and then bring other private landowners on board too. So I've been doing work around how the church can release land for food growing. So that's a bit of a plug, but if you've got any thoughts on that, that'd be good to hear.
I had just a question on that all sounds amazing, and I know you've mentioned it before, and it sounds like such a great thing that's happening. When you talk about kind of mapping informing that, it would be good to hear a bit more about that, and whether there's, I guess, like in the back of my mind as I've been listening to everyone here, it sounds at the moment like there's a lot of kind of like very localized stuff that's really interesting, and people are kind of sharing knowledge and sharing best practice and maybe helping things grow kind of here and there. Is there an appetite, or do you think there will be an appetite in the future to have some kind of nationally coordinated effort? And if so, it makes me think of, I don't know if any of you have come across the Slow Ways, which is a mapping effort from Dan Raven Ellison, but he basically pretty much since like it started just before COVID all happened, and I volunteered as part of it, but it was this huge kind of I guess kind of volunteer-led effort to map, you know, there was a specific methodology and stuff, but to map kind of connections between towns and villages all over the UK, and now that's all done and people are kind of testing those. But I was just struck by kind of what can be done when you get enough interested people involved, and kind of this nationally coordinated effort to get this incredible resource now that's kind of online and open access, and kind of still increasing levels of participation and stuff. Anyway, it's just a bit of a random thought, but yeah.
I actually think that's a fantastic connection that we need to make. I think Laurie Peake's involved with Slow Ways as well. So yes, and she's on the board of Incredible Edible. We should bring them into whatever we do here. I think that's really valuable. I'm just looking at these other questions. Good, Simon, I can give you that information offline. I'll send you the Right to Grow info. And I will put my email in the chat here for you, Fran.
Colin, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, yeah. So I think I'm thinking of the example of the Brownfield data, where, as Joolz said, kind of it's fragmented and patchy across different authorities. And as an example, if you're going to come to the central government saying, well, we want to change the policies so that local authorities are obliged to publish data, so that citizens in the city can actually use that data to find land and to do things like this. If you also go there with a solution, so you're not just basically putting demands on local authorities who are stretched considerably and don't necessarily always have the right skills in-house to be able to do it. You then sort of need, if you offer them solutions by saying, well, actually, there is this body which will happily lead on making this easy for local authorities. So, for example, we had some connections with what they call CCIN, so that they're Cooperative Council Innovation Network. So municipalities have lots of different kind of networks that they collaborate on different areas. So finding one that's appropriate for this, it might be the Cooperative Council Innovation Network or maybe something else. And then with them, we said, actually, well, we can help local authorities map this data. So essentially, we can sort of create connections with the different municipalities and then get their data and then publish the data in a common format. So basically, is this available in the same way to everyone across the country? So I think, so just putting demands on local authorities is tough if you can't also come with solutions for them.
So you're saying, Colin, that that's something that Digital Commons can do, or does, or has done with local authorities, or could do, or?
Well, we're working with kind of Oxford and the City Council for a mapping. So it's a multiple kind of activity mapping exercise for the promotion of cooperative development. But we're not. But it's more like if you're going to go to. Sorry, I'm going to step back in. And so for that type of mapping, something like the Cooperative Council Innovation Network would be the right place to organize a data gathering kind of exercise, standardization across multiple councils. So if there was something, a similar organization that connects councils, and then you'd say to them, well, actually, Digital Commons could help provide this service for municipalities. I think that would just it sort of makes it easier for the people writing policy to sort of accept, okay, we can see how that could be done. Rather than just see it as an obligation putting on authorities. Yeah. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, just something else to do that they don't have the capacity for, or not quite sure how to. Yeah. Joolz.
Yeah, I just want to say that I've had some really exciting things here. Particularly want to dive into some of the other communications that might have asynchronously or outside of this meeting. And what Anne-Marie said about the Welsh data mapping platform is really interesting, that it crashes, that some of the data sets are interesting, but really difficult to find necessarily what's useful. And something like LandExplorer makes that its objective is to make that kind of data accessible for non-technical or non-expert users, so we can become citizen planners. And I think also heard that, is there an appetite maybe to sort of build a national campaign around Right to Grow? Well, I would suggest yes. Perhaps even expanding the thinking in terms of how does that impact in terms of a community climate action plan. And there are lots of networks we can syndicate this kind of thing through. Mary from Friends of the Earth isn't here, but I'm a part of our local Friends of the Earth group, for instance, and they're doing a bunch of things in Friends of the Earth, like Great British Homes Upgrade. Right to Grow is really important. There's the Right to Build as well. So how do we meet our needs? How do we meet our needs as we face these multiple crises together? So lots of very exciting things that I'd like to be involved in with this network moving forward. Particularly if we have place-based organisation or setups. We're probably all in networks that have a variety of place-based things. iFarm are part of the Climate Emergency Centre network, and they've set up 37 climate emergency centres around the country. Most of them are urban, but there are several land-based projects as well. Really aiming to start to have these conversations with local authorities. There's, there's probably a good handful of local authorities we can start these conversations with. So Suffolk, Norfolk, Redbridge, North East, North of Tyne Combined Authority. And if we do go with a set of requests, as Colm says, for open data, how can you help us support community climate action? And also a set of activities that we can deliver in terms of community mapping, crowdsourced data, and start to access these spaces would be really exciting. So yeah, really support all of those things.
I think my head's exploding. So many amazing things.
Jules, who's set up the Climate Emergency Network?
So that's a couple of activist friends of mine called Ruth and Phoenix and a lady called Linda. They're the sort of driving force behind it. And their project is meanwhile use of buildings scheduled for development. So a really good example is they've taken over a 10,000 square foot warehouse in, maybe 40,000 square foot, but a very large warehouse anyway, that's an ex-home base in Ilford. And they set up as charities. They take on the buildings in terms of meanwhile use, and it's a win-win because they save the developers the business rates. Basically, they get business rate relief as charities, so the developer saves money. They sometimes give a proportion of that money to the organization that takes over the building. And the groups that are in the climate emergency centres are really interested in sort of climate education, and that's reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, but also it's a climate and ecological emergency, so we've got to really pay attention to our soil health and growing and resilience in terms of energy and food. And so they're place-based to start to engage with local authorities with community climate action, because it's going to take us all. And how do we align our community climate action with local authority policy? So there is a lot of policy, and we're really lucky in Norfolk and East Anglia, in particular Suffolk. Suffolk County Council has a net zero target of 2030, and that's not just for the county's activities, that's for everything: hospitals, schools, transport, and agriculture as well. We're in a very rural area. So how do we, the question for me becomes, how do we align our community climate action, including growing and access to land, with the council's existing policy? And a good proportion of that starts with data, because information is power. That's why developers always get first dibs and get options on stuff, is we didn't know it was there until it was gone. So yeah, we've got so many powerful advocates, and like you say, so many skills in this group that we can start to we can start that activity. We've got vast networks to syndicate that activity through, including our own networks, and organizations like Friends of the Earth, who I think Mary would probably be delighted to start to have these conversations about their data and networks.
Also just want to been thinking a lot about like the next kind of horizon, which is of the kind of the sort of landscape scale, bioregional, the sort of ecosystemic mapping, because we're not set up to think about our environments in the ways that our environments need us to think about them, and which is about ecosystem restoration on a kind of grand scale. And none of the is very few kind of tools which really enable us to do that, to think in that scale, and to sort of even the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, are kind of siloed to enable us to kind of think about them in sections, and within them there are fundamental contradictions. You can't have economic growth and have end poverty, in our, so there's also, and I wonder where this can go in terms of thinking more bioregionally as well, and landscape scale, and the thinking about the sort of nested scales, and the community and the local is of course important, but how does it interconnect systemically with everything else around it, and with the landscapes and ecosystems that it is embedded within. Also interested to hear from Simon if there are things that have come up for you in terms of starting to think about how we might work with local authorities or collections of local authorities in terms of sort of accelerating the work, and how that might sort of, what planners need and what local authorities might need or find accessible and helpful from mappers.
Well, I've made quite a few notes, which is really helpful. I particularly appreciated the point about looking at areas of deprivation, and kind of the need to have areas for food growing. So that was quite an interesting point that I hadn't thought about previously. So I guess there's kind of 2 points that I could make. The first one is to immediately respond to Maddie's point about regional planning, as it were. And my view is that, well, about 10 years ago, there were these things called regional spatial strategies, which were great because it meant that there was a strategic overview of kind of these regional planning bodies of, the whole of the Southwest, for instance, or the whole of the Southeast. And that doesn't happen in the same, well, I suppose you are starting to get things like in Bristol, you've got the regional plan there. So I guess actually, if you want to consider things from a regional basis, it's getting in on those kind of city region plans. As for kind of going down to like district councils or unitary councils and what might benefit them, if you can present to a local plan process, and preferably at the early stages of a local plan where a council is starting to formulate what they're doing, if you can present a well thought out set of submissions which include evidence on, well, we've identified that there's this, and this, these pieces of land that are important for all of these reasons, and we want you to allocate them in your local plan by some, and what the allocation would be, so whether it's local green space or whether it's something else is another question. But that's part of this giving the councils the answers, and that's always the approach that I've taken in local plans, is to give them the answers they need. Now, if they don't want the answers, what you then do is you turn up to what's called an examination in public of the local plan, and that's where a planning inspector assesses the local plan and everything within it, to see whether it's sound, and there's various different legal tests of what constitutes soundness. So then what you do is you turn up and you say, well, local authority X aren't doing this, this, and this, and this, and this. And actually what national policy and the law says is this, so therefore could you force them to do this? So there's plenty of mechanisms for getting involved. The problem is that local plans are tedious and boring, and they take a very, very, very long time. For instance, the Gloucestershire plan of three districts, I was involved in making submissions on that on behalf of gypsies and travellers for about 6 years. So things move slowly, and what it requires is someone to check the emails when next time they say there's some kind of consultation that's been put in, and then make some submissions. So anyway, those are my thoughts. It's boring and tedious, but it's really worthwhile doing. And there's some excellent examples, Lancaster and Cornwall springing to mind, of where these kind of efforts are really bearing fruit at the minute. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And I guess the other stuff we've been talking about is what's upstream of that. So the things that, I mean, I'm not sure how much a local plan is dictated to by, you know, how much national policy kind of overwrites what local people want. Or Joolz, is that from you? Had to go. Thank you very much. All right, cheers.
What a delight. Thanks.
Continued.
Look forward to the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joolz.
In answer to your question, Maddie, I think actually a lot of it comes down to being strategic at the moment. And maybe I'm being cynical, but I'm not entirely sure about how much appetite there is in the current administration. Although, in fairness, Gove is now the relevant Secretary of State, and in the past he has said some interesting things on this kind of subject. But I think the more changes we can get inserted at a local level, the more of a groundswell there is to then force change at a national level. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be not be advocating at a national level either at all. Far from it. But I do think these local efforts are very important for setting the scene, as it were.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just conscious we've got 8 minutes, so we want to do a sort of a bit of a sum up of the next steps. But Jeremy, do you want to?
Yeah, I've just been listening with, sort of quite amazed really about the level of interest and, sort of, as Joolz put it, dynamism here. Really interesting, slightly beyond my, not comfort zone, that's all right, but slightly beyond my expertise. But one of the things some of you have heard during our recent Northern Real Farming Conference and Policy Influencers Network meeting was back from feedback from COP26. And I think this is relevant to what Janie was talking about as well, about the right to food. What Duncan said quite clearly was that agroecology was deleted from the final text of COP26 communique, but that agroecology will therefore be high on the agenda for COP27 next year. And my take on this is we have the opportunity to work with Duncan, Nourish, and those people who hopefully will refine the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration as part of the route map to COP27. And somehow we need to finesse that so that what Maddie and I are thinking of doing is producing a template for local authorities next June. I think we're going to try and launch this to say agroecology is coming up the agenda rapidly. Here's how you do it. Simple as that. Now, if we can co-opt all this energy discussion, Janie's Incredible Edibles right to food, somehow get that message across in some simple format and wording, that's what I'm going to be working on.
Right to grow.
Right to grow. Agroecology.
That sounds good, Jeremy. We had in Lambeth, we are refining a document for all housing estates to use on best engagement for biodiversity and food growing. So it's like a practical guide for housing officers, because that's, in the urban context, a lot of the land is held around housing estates. So that document we're hoping can be shared with all authorities, all local authorities, especially the city ones. So things like that will also add to this pressure.
Simon.
Sorry, just one very quick point. There's a fantastic example of a green infrastructure checklist and benchmarking, which UE have done, and I'm sort of loosely connected to UE as well. That's one of the universities in Bristol, in case people didn't know the acronym. And the thought I've been having is that actually some kind of benchmarking mechanism of local plans or local authorities for agroecological purposes might not be a bad thing. And then that ties in quite clearly with the suggestion that Jeremy's just been talking about, is that actually if you give them the solutions, then they've got the chance to do it.
Great. So if you could send a link to that, Simon, if there is one, you can email it later or whatever. Brilliant. Just to say as well that I've started to have conversations with I'm in Bristol, with Bristol Community Land Trust about not only looking after land for housing, community-led housing, but starting to take on a portfolio of sites for food production as well across the west of England. So that's going to hopefully feed into the work that we're sort of trying to seed with the West of England Combined Authority to look at the city region scale, but also what role can a community land trust play in making land accessible across multiple local authorities, and according to a number of sort of criteria, agroecological, etc., small business, etc., criteria. And also just highlighting what Elizabeth's been saying in the chat about how do we integrate, how do we make sure that nutrient density is right at the centre of all of this, because that is dictated by soil health, and it's the link between soil and the human biome. So yes, wherever we can integrate that and bring that in. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. So we've got a sort of outline shape of our next gathering, where we'll be hearing from Lancaster about their Hope Spots mapping methodology, which Mark has been leading on with Rachel up in Lancaster, and so Sustain have also been doing some sort of food infrastructure mapping in Lancashire, which is so interesting that those two different mapping exercises might overlap. But I think Mark and Rachel will be presenting their mapping. Is that right, Mark? You're doing that with Rachel next time?
Apparently so. Happy to, of
Great.
course.
Yeah, lovely. And we've been meeting every couple of months. Does that still feel good for everybody? Yeah, fab. And Joolz has taken away some to-dos around the researching the platforms. And well, Janie, do you want to? You're muted.
I was thinking that I would see if Gather could get some kind of sketch idea up there that we can look at and think, okay, this is working, this isn't working, kind of thing. Just as a, what do you call it? Skeleton proposal. And I'll go back to them and ask them about, ask those questions that Joolz asked. That Mark asked. I think that's really important that we get clarity. So we'll do that before the next meeting.
So will you do that, or will
I can do that? Yeah, I'll talk to you, Mark, about those questions.
We can put them all in a doc, like
I thought Joolz was coordinating that.
Yeah, well, okay, between us, we'll do it.
Okay. Sure.
That's fine.
Great. Is there anything else, Janie, that we?
Nope. Very exciting. So much to think about. I'm just amazed that we managed to, you know, we could talk for hours. And I just think it's so rich, this conversation, and I'm grateful to everybody for giving their time to see how we can progress this. So it's good. Hopefully you can have conversations outside these meetings in between.
And is there, just in the last minute, is there anything else that people specifically want us to kind of foreground at the next meeting to give some dedicated time to? Okay. We'll see what comes up. There's always some juicy things to share. Brilliant. Okay.
Amazing.
Thanks, Jeremy. I will remember to stop recording. And we'll share the chat as well afterwards. These recordings are all on YouTube, the past 2 sessions as well. So we'll share links to those as well. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you all.
Bye. Meet you too. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week. Cheers.
And a happy Christmas.